Alright, greetings everybody, it's test time for Riku. Will she pass? Will she fail? Will we see a giant snail? Stupid rhymes, yes in time. I forgot the limit burst last time. Yeah, I you know what, forget it. I think I rhymed time with time. But here you go, here's your Riku limit burst. I definitely forgot it in the last video, so they, being generally pretty nice about it. It's just making sure I get it right away in the start of this video. Let's load up our story mission with our usual testing based team, see what happens. And the big thing today is talking about Riku as a potentially really good character. I mean, I wish that my Yuna was actually fully built already and we could see how it goes of accuracy versus not accuracy. I don't even think that the friend build is necessarily the best because, honestly, survival vest, as opposed to, just more evasion. It even is a little anti-evasion. Don't think that this is the best build we're going to see for Riku, but competitively, this team that we built is usually considered to be quite fast. Sephiroth also a bit of an evasion character that is splashed into a lot of parties right now to be quite nasty to the opponent. And we can see that even with all these different builds, Riku is quite quick. She's very fast, even in this party, and her evasion actually outpaces Sephiroth by a lot. So could Riku just be the new paired off character who is meant to just be in parties? Well, she would definitely have to bring as much utility as Sephiroth does. And Sephiroth, well, I mean, it's curse versus berserk. Both of these things can effectively shut down opposing teams, but that's something status effects do, so I'm not overly amazed or impressed about this yet. So I think we'll need to take a bit of a test run. Now going in here, of course, we do want to just get going right away. Now we can't fire off Sephiroth's limit burst, but if we just start looking at what Riku is effectively doing versus some of our characters right now, a 6% accuracy chance from Sephiroth. Now Sephiroth accuracy is only 44, but it does show potentially how good Sephiroth can actually be. He's still hanging in there, and 44 is starting to get a little bit in there towards it. All right, let's cast this. Start picking up some abilities. Now again, Riku, we are a little bit curious before we get too much into DPS. Now immediately limit burst is not accessible so on a very small map, if she hasn't cast anything, she won't be able to activate her limit burst right away. 49 is just not getting any decrease at all, so her movement could actually be a bit of a negative. I don't think that it would ever be on most maps a consideration, but if the map is incredibly small, or as we've seen with Grand Arena, well, I mean, there just isn't really that much time to buff, which means that Riku is just going to have access really to all of her most basic abilities, which do potentially, at least in the preview, seemed not maybe the most damaging. But let's see here. About 4,000, about 3,000 here. Gilgamesh's counter here at 64%, which does show a better overall amount of attack. And about 5,000, about 6,000. So our DPS, at least initially, looks quite good for being no time to effectively buff herself. Let's start casting some abilities. Running buffs. Running buffs. Hello, Sora. Alright, that was right in the middle of the video. So Sora decided to jump down and almost knock down my drink, which greatly appreciated, Sora. Love the little guy, but sometimes. Alright, so Riku, again, we have cast one of her support skills, one that effectively gives her, you know, barrier, some resistance, all of that stuff. That's pretty nice, but can we do better? And just 1 second here while I check something. No, just pause the video. Right, sorry about that. Had to make sure that something was going okay. But also, I do believe that I missed this ability the last time in the last video, which was a bit of an oversight by me, but sometimes get just too busy thinking about other things. Creates a barrier around self that reduces physical damage 4 times. Increases area attack evasion rate for 4 turns. And cancels Guts effect before attacking. So basically, if they have Ignore Fatal Spirit, this ability, or any of her abilities, will be able to get through that for her attack. So yeah, apologies for missing that in the previous video. Just kind of slipped my mind. We will now continue doing buffs. So let's fire off her second one. And now let's just see here. So Sephiroth, 0% chance of hitting Riku, which is quite interesting. Still an 80% chance though of getting that status effect in there. So let's move Sephiroth over here. Make sure that we're not targeting anyone else. And fire this off. We can also see that her counter chance, incidentally, also has not particularly the best hit rate. Sorry, Sephiroth does have a 42% chance of this limit burst hitting. Only about 2,689. But if the status effects do get through, that is a big consideration. 67% chance of this counter firing back, but only a 6% chance of hitting. There you go. Hit and miss. Now if we take a look at Gilgamesh here, Gilgamesh on the other hand, quite a different story. Gilgamesh is repping about 43% accuracy from here, 39 evasion, 138 speed with all said and done. And yeah, just potentially pushing this and a 98% chance. We're not going to fire that off because that would be quite brutal, but as talked about in the previous video, once Riku starts taking points of damage, that's when some of her abilities start fading off. If too many of her abilities start fading off, her performance will actually go down. We know that from some of her weapons, equipment, and skills. So that is a little bit concerning here. We can see Ashen Mont, only 39% chance of hitting. That counter not a problem here. And yeah, we are dealing a good amount of damage to her quite quickly. And with very little weighing the HP buffs, her HP isn't particularly as high as some of the other characters. And we saw this with Yuna in the previous week of potentially being a little bit concerning. Here, Dark Veritas, maybe a little bit more of a character that is less prepared for dealing with this, less accuracy and whatnot, has put him in a state where he just can't hit and will get hit and hit quite hard in return. Going through. Alright, so let's see what Riku can actually do now against some characters with her limit burst. She's fired all her power-ups. Ashimon is not super considered to be one of the strongest characters in the entire game now, but we can see running across different characters that, Berserk seems to be either very hit or miss. June, for example, has 50% Berserk immune or resistance, which just puts her at completely immune from that. That seems like a fairly big detriment for an attack that's also only doing about 4,000 points of damage, with Ashen Mont only about 6,000 points of damage. And as we go around, Sephiroth, 0% chance of hitting here. And if we look at even against Dark Veritas, who is particularly the least impressive character that we have on display here, this limit burst isn't doing that much, but it can choose multiple targets, and we're looking at really about, I don't know, at best maybe the mid 40s for a chance, which is close to 50%, but also a little bit disappointing. And mostly her damage seems generally decent, but generally decent on the potential premise that we are getting, you know, a good amount of opportunity for this character to evade a lot of other attacks. If she's not evading other attacks, well, might be a little bit disappointing in her performance. So let's talk about this character. Riku as an evasion character is pretty good from the evasion side. I think that she is really nasty to deal with, and if you end up not knowing that this character is going to be there, well, could be a disaster, because you kind of do need some amount of accuracy and a good amount of high accuracy to be able to deal with a fully built, properly vision carded up Riku. That being said, her accuracy is kind of a problem, because it seems like she is having, at least initially, some real problems with accuracy for herself. And her weapon, her subs, all kinds of stuff actually does not have any form, really, of boosting her accuracy. None of her sub jobs have it, and none of her, like, really things that she can equip seem to be really benefiting her that much for accuracy. So that is not great. Also, in Riku's main portion of her kit, even though she is effectively a damage dealer type unit, and she has a lot of good stuff in there, you know, stealing CT for herself, which is very tempo based, selecting multiple targets, being focused on that single target, so those select multiple is better, boosting agility without haste, increasing evasion rate for other characters, granting all these different effects, and dispelling this, dispelling that, reducing physical damage taken multiple times. All of this is generally nice, but Riku doesn't feel like a character that would last in a prolonged battle. I think she has a very strong start, kind of in the same way Garvel did, and it kind of falls off as the battle goes on. What's more, while she can remove things like protect and haste, you know, dispel a bunch of buffs from targets, that's all really nice, but she has no actual barrier breaker herself, which kind of is a problem for a DPS. Really, Riku feels like a character who capitalizes on the gotcha type idea of a fight, where you didn't know, how could you know, so therefore I win, which to me is not a super fun or enjoyable experience. I do recognize that it is part of the game and it is valid in that sense, but at the same time, I'm not super pleased about this, and I do think that she is missing some critical things. Her HP is quite low, so while she does have a lot of things in place very quickly to keep her alive, once the ball starts rolling and knocking her down, I feel like it gets worse and worse. However, these are impressions from a very set experience here. And, you know, we'll have to wait and see not only how she is over the course of the next week, but what next week's character of Jaden will look like, and whether that ranged attacker will also be able of dealing very well with evasion-based characters, which will widen the gamut of teams out there that can potentially deal with this evasion-style stuff. Yuna has already hit a tier 1 team. I talked about it yesterday, and she is incredibly good at being accurate without needing sure hit, which doesn't particularly also bode well for Riku. But I really think Riku is a fun character. You can have her in parties and enjoy her as not necessarily maybe the next gen evasion leader at this point, without more proof of concept of that being a thing. But at the same time, well, shit, she might just be kind of fun, which was the story that I felt with Yuna and Pain so far. Not oppressive, but potentially just enjoyable for people who are looking for that. So that is my thoughts. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, we'll report as we see more data come in. Later.